Erev Tov Rabotai, we are continuing with our Mishna Yomi, Masechet Beitzah. We are up to Perek Hey, Mishnah Zayin. Today's Mishnayot should be Leilul Nishmat, Neria ben Svetlana Aranbayev, and Eliyahu ben Burcha Israelov, Menuchatam Began Eden, Amen. And Lavdir ben Chaim Lechaim, with the Refuah Shlema B'Chabat Esther, and Daniel Shalom ben Rosa, B'Tor Shah Cholei Israel. The Mishnah begins, Mi shezimen etzlo ochim. If someone invited guests from outside his tchum who come to him on Yom Tov by means of their own eruv techumin, lo yolichu biyadam manot, they may not take portions of food home with them, since the food belonged to the host at the start of Yom Tov. It may not be taken out of his tchum. Even though he gave the food to his guests on Yom Tov, it remains confined to the tchum it had at the start of Yom Tov. Elim ken zika lahem manotehem me'erev Yom Tov. The guests may take food home only if the host had given them ownership of their portions before Yom Tov, in which case the food assumed the tichum of the guests. It is possible for him to give them ownership of the food even before they arrive in his house. One can transfer ownership of an object to another person even if the second person is not present by giving it to a third person who takes possession of it on the recipient's behalf, what we call zachin la'adam shelo befanav. The Mishnah concludes with some laws of muktzeh and mashkin v'shochatin et midbariyot. We may not give water to and then slaughter roaming animals on Yom Tov because they are muktzeh. Since animals that roam freely are not readily accessible, the owner did not intend to use them on Yom Tov and they are therefore muktzeh. The Mishnah means to forbid only slaughtering these animals. Feeding and giving water to one's animals is permitted on Yom Tov. The Mishnah mentions giving water only to impart some practical advice. A person should give water to an animal before slaughtering it because that makes the animal easier to skin. Let's have the Gemara explains that page 48 with Rashi. The Mishnah defines these terms, Elu hen bayatot alanot ba'ir. Domestic animals are those that spend the night in a town or inhabited area. Before we continue. Aval mashkin v'shochatin et bayatot. But we may give water to and slaughter domestic animals. So now the Mishnah defines these terms. Eluen bayatot alanot ba'ir. Domestic animals are those that spend the night in a town or inhabited area. Midbariyot alanot ba'efel. Roaming animals are those that spend the night in the pasture. So again, the Mishnah said we may not give water to and then slaughter roaming animals, which roaming animals are those that spend the night in the pasture, but we may give water to and slaughter domestic animals, which are those that spend the night in a town or inhabited area. And that is in Rabotai of Mishnayot Mesechet Beitzah, Hadra Chalan, Hadran Alach Mesechet Beitzah, Mazal Tov. We continue now with Mishnayot Mesechet Rosh Hashanah, Perek Aleph, Mishnah Aleph. In many areas of halakha, it is necessary to know when one year ends and the next one begins. However, the date that marks the beginning of a new year varies depending on the context. This Mishnah lists 4 different New Years. Arba Rashi Shanim Hem, there are 4 New Years. Bechad Benisan Rosh Hashanah Lamlachim. The first of Nisan is the New Year for counting the years of Jewish kings, by which legal documents are dated. The first year of the reign of a Jewish king ends when Nisan arrives, even if he began his reign shortly before Nisan, for example in Shvat. From the first of Nisan, we begin counting his second year. The sages inferred this law from Melachim Aleph, chapter 6, Pasuk 1, where the 4th year of King Solomon's reign is equated with the 480th year after the Exodus. Since the Exodus took place in the month of Nisan, the verse indicates that the years of a Jewish king's reign are also counted from Nisan. Now again, we said this is by which legal documents are dated. Legal documents were dated by the current year of the king's reign for the sake of peaceful relations with the king. If the date recorded in a note of debt or any other legal document that creates a debt, such as a marriage contract, is earlier than the date when the debt was actually incurred, the note is invalid. This is because it states that the lien on the borrower's real property took effect earlier than it really did. Therefore, such documents must contain the exact date, which includes the year. Vilaragalim, and for counting the first 3 festivals after one makes a vow. Someone who vows to bring an offering but does not do so until after the 3 pilgrimage festivals, Pesach, Shavuot, and Sukkot, have passed, transgresses a biblical prohibition in Sefer Dvarim, chapter 23, Pasuk 22. The Mishnah teaches that the count of the 3 festivals begins in Nisan, that is, from the beginning of Pesach, which falls in Nisan. When the Mishnah says the new year of festivals, it actually refers to the 15th of Nisan, when Pesach starts. Therefore, if he made the vow shortly before Pesach, the count of the 3 festivals begins that very Pesach, and he violates the prohibition when the next Sukkot ends 7 months later. However, if he made the vow shortly after Pesach, the count does not begin until the Pesach of the following year, and he does not violate the prohibition until Sukkot after that Pesach, some 19 months later. Bechad Be'elul Rosh Hashanah leMa'asar Behema. The first of Elul is the new year for determining which newborn animals should be grouped together for the animal tithe. A person who owns cattle, sheep, or goats is biblically obligated to bring 1/10 of the animals born each year as offerings in the temple. Ma'asar Behema, the animal tithe. He gathers the newborn animals into a pen that has an opening wide enough for only one animal to pass through at a time. Counting the animals as they leave the pen, he marks every 10th one with red paint, saying, "This is Maaser." He brings the marked animals as offerings, and he and his guests eat their meat in Yerushalayim, as the Torah says in Sefer Vayikra, chapter 27, pasuk 32. The owner must make sure that all the animals in the pen were born in the same year, because an animal born in one year cannot be used to fulfill the Maaser obligation that applies to animals born in another year. The Mishnah teaches that for this purpose, the year begins on the 1st of Elul. Therefore, animals born on or after the 1st of Elul must be tied separately from the animals born before that date. Rabbi Elazar and Rabbi Shimon omrim bechad b'Tishrei. However, Rabbi Elazar and Rabbi Shimon say that the 1st of Tishrei is the new year for this purpose. And the Rav does tell us, Rabbi Elazar and Rabbi Shimon da'amri bechad b'Tishrei, that the Chad does not follow the opinion of Rabbi Elazar and Rabbi Shimon, who say that the 1st of Tishrei is the new year for this purpose. The Mishnah continues, Bechad b'Tishrei Rosh Hashanah l'Shanim. The 1st of Tishrei is the new year for counting the years of non-Jewish kings, by which legal documents are also dated for the purposes of a document dated by the years of a non-Jewish king. Each year begins on the 1st of Tishrei. However, like we learned in the case of documents dated by the years of a Jewish king, each year begins on the 1st of Nisan, as the Gemara says on page 8a, Masechet Rosh Hashanah. The Mishnah continues, V'la shmitin v'la yovlot, for the start of the Shemitah and Yovel years when land may not be worked. Every 7th year Shemitah, it is biblically forbidden to sow, plow, or otherwise work the land of Eretz Yisrael. This law also applies every 50th year Yovel, which is the year that immediately follows 7 Shemitah cycles. The Mishnah teaches that the years of Shemitah and Yovel begin on the 1st of Tishrei. La Nitiyah, for counting the first 3 years of a sapling when its fruits are prohibited. Orla, we know the Torah forbids us to eat or derive any other benefit from fruit that grows on a tree during its first 3 years. Orla, in regard to this law, the new year starts on the 1st of Tishrei. If a tree was planted at least 45 days before the 1st of Tishrei, it begins its 2nd year on that date. These 45 days are required because the tree needs 14 days to take root. Until then, it is not considered to be truly planted. The next 30 days are necessary because that is the minimum length of time that can be reckoned as 1 year for this purpose, according to a halachically accepted view. Therefore, if a tree is planted 45 days before the 1st of Tishrei, it begins its first year upon taking root 15 days later, and its 2nd year 30 days after that on the 1st of Tishrei. And for determining which vegetables should be tithed together. The owner of produce grown in Eretz Yisrael is obligated to separate certain portions from it each year. He gives any amount, a 50th to a Kohen, Tiruma, and 1/10 of what is left to a Levi, Maaser Rishon. He then separates a 2/10 from that which still remains. In the 1st, 2nd, 4th, and 5th years of the Shemitah cycle, he takes a 2/10 to Yerushalayim and eats it there, or he exchanges it for money, which he takes to Yerushalayim to buy food to eat there, what we call Maaser Sheni. In the 3rd and 6th years of the cycle, he gives a 2/10 to the poor, who may eat it anywhere, Maaser Ani. Under biblical law, these obligations apply only to grain, grapes, and olives, but the sages extended them to include vegetables. The produce of each year must be dealt with separately because produce of one year cannot be designated as Tumah or Maaser for the produce of another year. The Mishnah teaches that the year for vegetables begins on the 1st of Tishrei. Therefore, one may not combine vegetables picked before the 1st of Tishrei with vegetables picked after that date and take Tumah or Maaser from both sets together. Another reason why we need to know the date of the new year is that the law of Maaser sometimes changes from one year to the next. For example, the 2/10 taken from 2nd year produce must be eaten in Yerushalayim, but the 2/10 taken from 3rd year produce must be given to the poor. Be'echad b'Shvat Rosh Hashanah le'ilan k'divrei Bet Shammai. The 1st of Shvat is the new year for determining which fruits of a tree should be tied together according to the view of Bet Shammai. The produce of each year must be treated separately with respect to Terumah and Maaser. Like we explained, according to Beit Shammai, the year for the produce of a mature tree more than 3 years old begins on the 1st of Shvat. Therefore, one may not designate fruit that emerged on a tree before the 1st of Shvat as Terumah or Maaser, a fruit that emerged afterwards, or vice versa. Unlike vegetables, which are classified by the year in which they are picked, fruit is classified by the year in which flower falls off and the fruit begins to emerge in its place. Beit Hillel omrim b'chamisha bo. However, Beit Hillel say the 15th of Shvat is the new year. For this purpose, the Mishnah began by stating that there are 4 new years, but actually listed 5. The 1st of Nisan, the 15th of Nisan, the 1st of Elul, the 1st of Tishrei, and the 1st or 15th of Shvat. So the Gemara, page 7b, explains the Mishnah said 4 because there are 4 months, Nisan, Elul, Tishrei, and Shvat, that contain a new year. And that is on Abotai of today's Mishna Yomi. Baruch Adonai Leolam. Amen v'amen.